All right, welcome everyone. This is the Golden Gate Computer Society monthly general meeting where we normally have a presenter with interesting information as we will have today. And I will let Karen give us an introduction to our speaker. Thank you, Karen.
You bet. Good evening, everybody. I'm Karen Stagg, and our guest this evening is someone I found I follow on Facebook because she has a lot of great tips, and I've learned a lot from her. So I reached out, and she was kind enough to say yes, she would share some of her wisdom with us at our general meeting. And so I'd like to introduce Jennifer Dove, also known as TechGirlJen if you are on Facebook. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Karen and Marcelino, and hello, everybody. I'm tuning in from Ohio over here on the East Coast, so it's the late night training for me, but I'm super excited to be here. I put together some information around AI, but let me tell you a little bit about my background before I pull my screen up. So Karen did find me on Facebook and she reached out to me. I've been a little bit about my background. I was an educator for about 20 years and then moved into professional development. I did some instructional design and I kind of fell into social media creation by accident. I was working in a corporate environment doing learning and development, and I just started posting tips around using your iPhone, real simple things that my mom always calls me and says, "Hey, can you show me how to do that thing?" Or my cousin calls me and says, "I don't know how to do this." Or, I would meet people for coffee and they would ask me, "Show me this really cool thing that you did." So I started shooting some little videos, and before I know it, I was like at 100,000 followers and officially a social media content creator. I don't know that I was much of an influencer. I didn't really influence people to do anything except listen to me talk. So I don't like the word influencer, but I left that corporate role and I've been doing social media ever since. And I'm now about to cross 1 million followers across the platforms combined, which is crazy wild, but I happened to find an audience of people who needed that help that is often overlooked, and that is Gen Xers and baby boomers. And I am part of that community. So I am happy to be here and share some of my knowledge with you. And AI is something that Karen, I know she's very excited about. And we had a conversation around what kinds of things that we could talk about. So I put together a training. I don't know if it's so much of a training, more of a conversation. It's going to be really simple and light, but it's basically some practical AI for everyday use. And if you know anything about me or you start to follow me after today's session, which I hope you do, one thing about me I will tell you is I am big on being simple, not using any of that blah, blah, blah jargon, right? There's so much of that. And I try to stay pretty practical around the tips that I give. This is not coding. This is not us going down in deep and building apps. This is just basic AI. I'm probably going to hit on a few things that you know, and hopefully hit on a few things that you don't, so that you walk away tonight with at least one cool thing that tomorrow you're going to sit down and go, "Oh, I'm going to try this because I heard about it from Jen the other night at our meeting." So without further ado, let's get rolling. So everybody can see my screen. You kind of put a hand up and let me know that everybody can see it perfectly. Great. Now I'm going to look over here because I've got a couple of screens. So don't think I'm not looking at you, but I'm going to look over here as I stay on track. The agenda, basically welcoming, and that's kind of where we are now, just talking about what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to move into some AI terminology. There's a lot of AI words, all that jargon garbage going around. I'm going to break it down simply so that you understand what those words mean when you hear them. We'll talk about the chat assistants. A few of you probably already know the two big ones, but I had brought a couple others to come in and talk about those. We're going to hit on AI safety and privacy. and talk about what I call the trust rule, and what you should and shouldn't be putting in AI. I'm going to give you a little formula how to talk to your AI, which is prompting basics, and then give you a couple of tools that you might want to try this week. And then, like mentioned earlier, we'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have a question as we're going, you want to just keep a little notepad. I always have a notepad here. As much of a techie as I am, I still always have a paper and pencil right by me. And if I think of something on the fly, I can get it down. Feel free to write it down somewhere, and we'll get to those at the end. All right. So let's talk about terminology. Chat and prompt are probably the two that people are most familiar with, right? The chat is the back and forth conversation that you have with an AI chatbot, right? So the questions back and forth, the prompt is what you're asking it. And there are some really great ways that you can ask prompts. And really, the secret to good conversations and getting good feedback from an AI is always in the prompt. It's how you're asking what you need. The agent and slash agentic, so that's the AI that actually takes actions for you. So you're hearing a lot more about agents that are doing things. And what exactly are they doing? Well, they're taking AI a step further out of the conversation, and then they're out there doing things. So these might be people who are, or agents that are, booking things for you, checking your email, pulling reports. So it goes out and does activities on your behalf. And then the model, that's just the specific AI engine that's behind the model. So you've got different ones. You've got Gemini, you've got Copilot, you've got OpenAI, which is the one behind ChatGPT. That's just the model. Other words that you may not be familiar with: hallucination. So hallucination is very common in AI, because you have to remember AI is not human. It's trained by humans, but it's not human. So it often hallucinates or makes up answers. This is why you often hear, double check your work or double check the output before you say, oh, hey, this is gospel. It may not be, right? AI agents often AI agents will often make many mistakes, and we call those hallucinations. All right, training data. Training data is the material that your AI is learning from. So when you hear AI is learning from your chats, that's your training data. We're going to talk more about that later on in the training and how you can opt out of those things. The context and memory, that's basically how much the conversation can remember all at one time. So if you're having one long chat, the context and memory is how long it remembers all of that information. And then a multimodal, that's an AI that works with more things than just text. So images, voice, video, those types of things would be a multimodal, right? So it does many different things. And by the way, don't feel like you have to take any notes. I will have this presentation for you as a PDF digital. I'll make sure to share it with Karen and Marcelino so that you'll have access to this too. So I know I can't take notes and pay attention at the same time. Sometimes it's hard for me. So just know that I will be giving you a copy of this. All right, so let's talk about some of the chat assistants. So raise your hand if you're familiar with ChatGPT or you at least used it one time. Okay, a few people have. All right, how about Claude? Anyone here used Claude before? Okay, so Claude's fairly new to most of you. How about Gemini? Okay, a couple of Gemini users. Copilot? A couple of Copilot users. Good. How about Duck.ai? Does anyone use that one? Oh, okay. Found one. Found one that nobody knows. Good. So let's talk about some of the different agents. We'll start with ChatGPT, which seems to be the one that is most widely used. And what I'm going to do is just briefly touch on this. I don't need to pull up the screen for ChatGPT since most of you have used it, and I want to spend more time on the ones that maybe you're not as familiar with. So ChatGPT, one of the things a lot of people don't understand about ChatGPT is that even if you're paying for it, it's still collecting data about you. It's still training on your information. So we're going to talk about this later on about privacy and how to stay safe when using it. But you need to be thinking about that when you're using ChatGPT. Even if you're using the paid $20 a month version, it's still using your information. Now, Claude is a little bit different, and I'll pull up Claude here. Just switch my screens that I'm sharing. A couple of you mentioned that you had used Claude before. So this is Claude. My Claude is actually my favorite AI model. And I like it because it's more literary, I feel, and it allows me to do a lot more technical work. I do a lot of, like, I like to build things and create things, and co-work is kind of like the multi-modal that it'll do things behind the scenes if I program it. So I'm real nerdy like that and enjoy doing those kinds of things. But Claude is really good with long documents and writing. Better than ChatGPT. I'm not saying that I don't use ChatGPT because I actually like both. And that's one thing, as you'll learn, using different AIs is good because you get a feel for how they work. And you might find you like doing one thing in one of them and then something else in another. So that's kind of a good way to approach it with an open mind, that knowing that they all work just a little different. But one of the things to know about Claude is it does share your information unless you have a pro plan. So if Claude is something that you want to use and you don't want it to train from your information, you need to purchase the pro plan. Now, Gemini, switch over to this one.
Yep.
Gemini, yes. Was there a question? A question? Okay, let me get a quick sip of water here. Gemini is Google's agent. So you can get Gemini absolutely free. Now, there's no cost to it unless you want to upgrade to a pro version. The free versions, again, do train on your information. And when you use them, you always want to go into your settings and look at your privacy settings inside of here. So you would go into activity, I believe, here, and you would make sure to turn those things off. And I have a really good handout that shows you step by step, and I'll make sure to drop that to Karen too. I just posted about that on social media last week, how to turn off sharing in their privacy settings for some of the different AI chats. So I'll make sure to give that to you. So Gemini is Google's chatbot, and you'll notice something so far, just seeing Claude and Gemini, they're set up very similar. You know, you've got your chat here in the middle, you've got your tools over on this side, and then it keeps track of all of your chats over here. And most of the time, your settings fall down here at the bottom by where your name is. So notice that a lot of them have the same look. Now, Copilot, again, looks very similar the way it's lined up. Copilot has more of a web search vibe to it. And most people who use Copilot are businesses because Copilot gets integrated into their Microsoft Office suite that they use at work. So when I worked with a corporation, they had Microsoft Office, and I was doing some side work for them, and they had Copilot built in. which was a really nice feature because it was a tool that they used to organize their company's information. So they would use Copilot and, ask it to pull something up from a file or ask it to do something, but it all stayed internal to that organization. So that's one of the features of Copilot is it all kind of stays inside. But also Copilot has this really nice temporary feature in the corner where you can start a chat with Copilot and make it temporary. And that way it does not train or save your information. So that's a nice feature of Copilot. The last one I want to share with you is one called Duck.ai. So you may have heard of DuckDuckGo, which is a web browser similar to Safari or Google Chrome. DuckDuckGo is a browser that has always been modeled as being a safe browser. In fact, I remember hearing about it when I was training teachers. They were using it in classrooms with students because they felt in the era of Google, DuckDuckGo was one that was a little more safe. So it's been around a lot longer than people think. Now, Duck.ai is its version of an AI chatbot. And even on the free version, it does not share your information. It is by far the most private AI chatbot that I have found to date. And it's a great one to use with younger populations. It's a great one to use if you're just kind of experimenting. And you notice I pulled it up here and I didn't even have to sign up for an account, which was even better, right? Didn't have to give my email and a password and do all of that nonsense. I could just go here and I can use it and it's completely private. Definitely one that you should look into. All right. So I'm going to move back over here to my slide again. And let's talk a little bit about the differences between the two that most people know, which is ChatGPT and Claude. ChatGPT is more bundled. So you can't do images on Claude. That's one thing I found. It doesn't do images. You ask it to create something, but ChatGPT is actually really good at creating images. ChatGPT is also great for beginners. So if you're new to using these types of tools, that would be one that I would 100% recommend trying before jumping into one that might be a little more complex. Now, Claude has a cleaner interface, maybe. I feel like the interfaces are kind of similar, but it really does well if you want to use it for things like writing. A lot of people are using, that's where kind of people started using AI was for writing, saving time. People were writing books with AI. And, not that I agree with that. I think it takes a little creativity out, but, a lot of people were using Claude to do that because it was much better at that. But if you haven't tried either one, I definitely recommend that you give them both a spin. All of these tools have free tiers where you can go and sign up. You don't have to pay. And I recommend that you don't pay for any until you find one that you really like. I pay for Claude because it's my favorite, but ChatGPT I think I was paying for that one before I learned how to use Claude and found that for what I use AI for, it was just a better fit for me than ChatGPT was. But I definitely encourage you to try them and definitely encourage you to try the Duck.ai. I think that is one that is really not talked about enough because you don't have to sign up, you don't have to pay, everything's private. I definitely think that is worth taking a look at. And something I want to point out before I move on, when it comes to privacy, when you do go into a chat and you turn off data sharing so that they can't train from your information, just know that it only is protecting you from that point on, from when you turn that on and moving forward. So if you went in there and put in your lab work or you wanted to, question things about your address, or, things that you probably shouldn't put into AI, but if you had done that stuff and you didn't have that setting turned on to protect yourself, just know that that data can be out there floating around in their models. Okay, looking at my time here, we're at the half an hour, and I want to make sure I have plenty of time to answer your questions at the end. So let's talk about safety, privacy, and what I like to call the trust rule. So I used to tell this to my students when I taught elementary school up to 6th grade. And Google was real big when I was teaching, and students love the internet. They love to go on there and search for all kinds of things. And I would always tell them, hey, if you're going to go out there, don't put anything out there that you wouldn't say to your grandma, right? That was called the grandma rule, right? The trust rule. But if you wouldn't say it to a friend, if you wouldn't say it to a family member, if you wouldn't say it to your mother or your cousin, or you wouldn't say it publicly in a coffee shop, you probably shouldn't put it into AI. So it's really important to be thinking about what you're putting in there. You can always do things like if you're trying to find out the answer to something, you could, like, for example, let's say you wanted to find out, understand readings from a recent blood test. And this is actually something that I did recently. I had some blood work done, and you get that paper back. I had no clue what all of the numbers meant. And the doctor, of course, doesn't tell me what all of the numbers mean. So I come home and I try to doctor myself. And, I'm like, okay, so I go to my chat bot and I'm like, so a friend of mine went to the doctor and this is what their things were. Tell me what this means and how I can help them. Right? So that's just a little strategy that I used because, oh, my friend wants to know, blah, blah, blah. And that's something that that helped me to understand the lab work. But again, think to yourself what you're posting. And if you wouldn't tell somebody that you knew, you probably don't want to put it out there. And what exactly does the training mean anyway? So, okay, so it has my data, it's training on my data. What does that mean? Well, what it means is there are people out there who their job is to train the models, engineers who are out there training models. And now they're just hiring, everyday people in all kinds of different fields. And what they do is they review the data for accuracy and whatnot, and they use it to train the model. So if you had put your social security number next to your name in there somewhere, at some point it's going to come across somebody else's computer, and probably not a good thing, right? So that's what it means when you think about the AI's training on your information. Okay. Oh, I forgot it. This is already in this training. So I do have a handout on this, but it's also in here. This is how to turn off the training on all of these models, which I think is super helpful. People can tell you all day long, hey, make sure you're being protected. But then you go in there and you're like, where are all the settings? I have no idea. There's all kinds of things over here and whatnot. So this will be helpful. It's basically you start from your settings and go into controls for ChatGPT, and you would just turn off improve the model. So you can look through all of these, and you'll have this as a handout again at the end. So if you use any of these, this is exactly how to go and turn off the training. A lot of these platforms, they turn this on by default. They don't tell you they do that, right? And like I mentioned earlier, even in the paid versions of some of these, you're still not protected by default. You have to go in there and turn it off. That's something worth noting. All right, so let's talk about prompting. Prompting is probably one of the most complicated things that I had to learn when learning how to use AI. Because initially, and you may have felt this way too, initially, you want to use it like Google. You want to just type in a question and get an answer, right? But you have to think about it in a different way. It's not a web search. It's not a web search. It's more of a conversation. So when I think about a good prompt, and there are tons of tools and websites out there that, people are spilling prompts all the time out on social media. You can find a lot of really good prompts. But I try to think of a context, a request, and a constraint. So a context is, who are you? Earbuds are falling out here. There we go. Earbuds are not made for my ears. I need the kind that rock around. So the context is who you are. So I would think of, let's say I needed, let's go back to the blood work, I guess, example. And I'm going to say, you are a very knowledgeable doctor. That's the context. I'm telling it what I need it to be in that moment. And then the request would be what I want it to do. Review the lab work for my friend and tell me what's some advice I can give her, or give me a list of X, Y, and Z. So whatever the restraints are. And then your constraints is what types of limits or boundaries or what tone you want it in. So you could say, I guess the constraint would fall here. I want this in a PDF document that's printable and easy to hand off, right? So the context, you're telling it who to be. The request is what you want it to do. And the constraint is what length, tone, format do you want it in? Do you want a spreadsheet? Do you want a PowerPoint? Do you want an email? Do you want an image? Do you want an infographic? Right? So those would all be those requests, and then constraints and what you want it on. So this is a pretty simple formula, I think, that you can use. Can you talk to it like Google? Sure, you can, but you're going to get much better responses the clearer you are with your prompt, because you're setting that expectation for what you want it to do. Because remember, it's just a computer, right? It's artificial intelligence. So sometimes you have to give it more guidance to get exactly what you want. And here's a little secret tip that a lot of people don't know. If you're not sure how to phrase your prompt, just tell the AI what you need and say, I need a document to give to my friend about their blood work. Can you give me a prompt that I need to give you? And it will write the prompt for you to give back to them. AIs are that smart that they can actually write the prompt for you. And I found that really helpful because I was terrible at writing prompts in the beginning. It took me a long time to get good at it. And so if I didn't know what I wanted, I just asked it to tell me, what do you need from me to make this thing happen, right? And that's a great way to start. And it will give you what you need. All right, so let's talk about tools to try. This week I really definitely encourage you to try the Duck.ai if you've never experienced that one. Gemini has some really nice additional tools. In fact, one you may have heard of is called Notebook LM. And Notebook LM does some really interesting things where it pulls information in and creates things. Like one time I used it, I took a document, I was just playing around with it and learning it, which, by the way, is my favorite way to learn AI, is to just play around with it. Get in there and just try some stuff. One of my favorite things to ask it to do is to create a trip itinerary for me. I'm going to Rome for a week. Plan me, restaurants for me to stop at, and give me an itinerary, and just doing some fun things like that. Asking it for a recipe, asking it for the best way to do X, Y, and Z. Like, just play around with it. There is no specific way, we can prompt and I can give you all kinds of formulas and whatnot, but you can go in there and just play around with it, get comfortable with it, and then you'll get better at it. And that's one of the things that I love. Anyway, going back to my Notebook LM story, I one time put in a document, and it was I don't know, it was some boring document about some processes for an organization. And I'm like, oh, this is so boring. What can I do with it? I fed it to Notebook LM, and it turned this long, boring document into a podcast with two people having a conversation about the information that was on that page. And I thought, where was this when I was in high school? How amazing would that have been, right? Like I just went and saw the Odyssey with my husband last weekend. When I tried to read that book in high school, I really struggled because that type of writing was really hard for me to understand. That and Shakespeare, right? Two things that are just really, really, that was difficult for me. So what did I do? I used to use Cliff Notes. Remember the Cliff Notes that everybody used to get? You go buy them at the bookstore in the yellow and black stripe. Oh my gosh, I had so many of those. But to be able to take information and be able to put it somewhere so that you can hear people having a conversation about it. How interesting is that? I mean, what a great learning tool that was. So listening to that podcast was just another way for me to ingest that information that the AI tool was able to refigure it into a way that my brain said, oh, I get it, right? So that's definitely one to try out. And that's also good. And that's on my list here too. And it's free, by the way. Notebook LM doesn't cost anything. It's one of the tools that goes with the Google Suite. It's good for recipes too. It's good for medical notes, things like that. If you've got questions on, let's say you're diving deep into, somebody was talking about the shoulder. I think I heard earlier, somebody was talking about their shoulder and it was causing problems. As soon as someone said, oh, you've got arthritis in your shoulder, like just putting in information around, oh boy, I've got arthritis in my shoulder. What are some great ways that I can stretch that out or feel good, or some home remedies, and just throw it all in there. And it's going to spit out information in an organized fashion that you're going to be able to understand, that you can actually use to feel better. The Google Lens. The Google Lens is great. So the Google Lens is a tool that's actually on your phone. And whether you're an Apple user or an Android user, when you pull up Google, there's a little scanner tool and it sits up in the corner. But you can point that at something. So let's say let's say you're at a family reunion and somebody is wearing the most amazing shirt and you want that shirt. This is a good example because my husband actually did this the other day. You want that shirt and you're like, where am I going to find that shirt? You go to Google and you pull up Google Lens, and it's just a little button in the corner. It looks just like a magnifying glass. And you push it and you take a picture of that shirt. And do you know what happens? You get a list of things on your phone where you can buy that shirt. That's super helpful, crazy AI stuff, magic happening right there, right? You can do that on Amazon too. A similar tool is on Amazon. You go into Amazon's app and there's a little scanner button tool at the top. And we all do this. You're at Walmart and you see something and you want it and you're like, wonder how much that is on Amazon before I spend it in person, right? Totally guilty of doing that. You just take a picture and then that picture brings back all of the results. It's pretty amazing to be able to do that. Or if you want to go to Amazon and take a picture of that person's shirt, it's going to pull up shirts just like that on Amazon that you can order, and if you're a Prime member, have in 2 days or less. So pretty cool. That's some pretty neat things. And then documenting a process. So documenting a process is such a great way to use AI, no matter what it is, whether you're writing a recipe or you want to write down a bunch of steps that you do often. Something I did the other day that I thought was really neat, I had a bunch of scribbled notes. I had attended a training and online, right? So I'm trying to listen and I'm taking like half notes and whatever. I took a picture of all of the notes from my phone. I sent those pictures to my AI chat bot of choice and I said, please organize this gobbledygook of messages. Okay, put this together in a way that makes sense. And so what it did was it took it all and it organized it in a nice little list for me. And I was like, oh, that's so much simpler than looking at my notes and trying to figure out what is this? What did it say? How did that all come together? It's just such a great tool for documenting processes. And that's one of the tricks that I like to use because I'm a terrible note taker and even worse at dissecting my notes and figuring out what the heck I was trying to write down. So try that. Snapdrop, I actually put this on screen because I believe, Karen, I think you told me about this in our call last. So Snapdrop is a tool that allows easy file sharing between your devices. So if you have Apple products, there you can copy and paste and you can AirDrop between devices, but we don't all have all Apple products, right? You might have a PC and an Apple phone and something else, but Snapdrop allows you to move files between. So that's definitely a tool that you want to check out. Now, Karen, I might put you on the spot and ask you to speak to that tool a little bit. Have you used it?
Yeah, I actually was going to mention this, but I didn't want to interrupt. So perfect. I actually did one of my SIGs. This was in one of my SIGs a while ago when I switched from having a flip phone to my first smartphone, which happened to be an Android phone. I was trying to get things off of my phone without having to send them as a text or that sort of thing, because there were 50 zillion pictures. And so even though I wasn't able to send them via Snapdrop from my flip phone to my iPhone, I was able to send them to the Android phone. And then from the Android phone, I actually included both my iPhone as a recipient as well as my PC. And I was able to, it designates you as, pink flamingo or whatever. And then it designates each of your devices with these very colorful names. And and then it tells you to select these things. And I discovered you can actually select some pretty good sized files on these. And I was able to get everything, I mean, everything off of my phone, off of my flip phone, without having to send a single text. And I was able to get everything into a usable place using snapdrop.net. I just found it to be one of the most useful things. It's like having, what's it called? AirDrop, which is on iPhone. But if you have, I have an Android tablet, I have a PC, I have an iPhone, and then I have two other Android tablets and several other PCs. And so going between devices, this made it so much faster and so much easier because I didn't have to choose any kind of format, and it was very, that the process was very easy. That's I think what I liked most about it was that it was simple. You didn't have to jump through hoops. You didn't have to create an account. You could just go in and use it. Because you would just go to their website. And sometimes it was a little bit buggy and it would kick you off of it. And I knew that going in because I'd been warned about that possibility. But it didn't happen often enough to where it was an issue. And because I knew it going in, I kind of planned for that as far as how I moved things, and I tried to move things in groups that made sense to me. But yeah, it's been it's a very useful tool, and I always have it in my back pocket.
That's great. So I dropped that link inside the chat for anyone that wants to copy that and go take a peek at that. You can. But I wanted to make sure that I shared that out. And Karen, you were perfect to talk about that. So thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, so we're getting here to the end of my presentation. Look, I could have gone on with AI for another 2 hours. There's so much information out there, but like I said, I am not one to over jargon, over complicate. I like to keep things simple and clear, and I hope that I was able to do that today just by touching on a few of these things, enough to at least get your interest sparked that you might go and try one of these tools. But I do want to talk for just a second before I hand it back over and we do some Q&A. If you want to connect with me, I've got a couple of things that you can do. I have a newsletter that you can sign up for. It goes out usually twice a month. It used to go out weekly. It was a lot of work to try to keep up with that. So it goes out about twice a month, and it's my newsletter. You can sign up at TGJ, which stands for TechGirlJen.bio, and that's my link in bio. Something new that I'm launching, and it's kind of like, yeah, I haven't really mentioned it to anybody yet, but I'm beta testing. Let's say I'm beta testing an actual newsletter that goes out and gets mailed to people. Now, I know it sounds crazy for a tech girl to want to send a physical newsletter in the mail, but honestly, I've been playing around with the idea for a little while, and I sent myself one just to try it out. And it's, like maybe 8 pages. It's really thin, but it's got some checklists in here and some treats. And then in the back, I put some QR codes to some resources that I have digitally somewhere. But I honestly think we've gotten so far away from the mail that people are kind of craving that again. So I'm experimenting with this. It hasn't officially been launched, but I call it the Techie Post. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can go check that out. Obviously, you can find me on social network. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, and YouTube. That's a lot to manage. But most everything that I put out usually cross posts to all of those networks. So wherever you like to go and do your social networking, you'll find me. And then the last thing that I have is what I call the Techie Club. And that is my private community of people. I have about 30 people in there right now. And I teach in there once a month, deliver a workshop similar to this. I have people in there that share information with each other. I go live in there occasionally and just do some Q&A. And then all of my resources are in there, and everybody gets access to everything at no cost. So they get to attend trainings for free. They get to, get all of any resources that I sold in the past. They get access to all of that for free. And joining, it's just, I believe it's $10 a month, what people pay for getting that. And I'm offering new people that subscribe to the Techie Post, they get the community for free. So, and I think this is $7 a month, so it's even cheaper. And I know subscriptions are like, well, everything's a subscription, right? But have to cover printing costs when it comes to this thing. But
quick question for you, Jen.
Yeah.
Could you the sound skipped for a second. So if you subscribe to the Techie Post, you are automatically in the Techie Club. Is that what you said?
Yes. If you subscribe to the Techie Post, you get the Techie Club for free.
And the Techie Post was how much?
The Techie Post is going to be, and it's not well, it's soft launched right now. So like I haven't mentioned it on social media yet. It's $7 a month, and you just get one of these a month.
Got it.
And this is the first edition right here. But if you join Techie Club and you don't want the mailer, inside of Techie Club, I put the digital version of this is inside. So they get this for free. So
that's the $10 a month.
Right.
Okay.
I should just make it all $7 a month. That would make much more sense, wouldn't it? Probably.
No clue.
So these links are embedded in this PDF. And if it's something that you want to check out, this is what the Techie Club looks like. Basically, the community for me is for people who just, don't want to have to ask other people, who just want to be able to access me whenever, because, when you have the amount of followers on social media that I do, it's impossible to keep up with messages. I tried to in the beginning, and I just couldn't. I was up till 2 a.m. answering messages, and it just became so difficult. But having a small community like this allows me to do more exclusive things like these types of training, which I love to do, these types of trainings with smaller groups of people. So if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend that you check that out. And then the Techie Post looks like this. You can go here and you can kind of see a preview of what they look like. It was kind of like my answer to, hey, Jen, why don't you write a book? And I said, I can't write a book in tech. Tech changes too much. all the time. By the time I'd have the book written, everything would be different. So, a nice little 8-page guide on whatever is popular that month, I said works for me. So we'll try it. So definitely check that out if you get a chance. All right. So, and by the way, the tool that I used for this presentation, if you liked this presentation and the way it looked, I used a tool called Gamma, Gamma, and it is a tool that allows you to put in an outline, put in your information, and it builds a presentation for you. And this presentation, after I had all of my information that I wanted to talk about, it built this presentation for me in 30 seconds. Pretty amazing.
Great.
Right.
And I could go in and
That's a nice tool right there. Well, Jen, thank you
yeah.
very, very much. Great presentation. I will be turning off the recording and we'll open it up to Q&A.